the largest academic competition in the world, the grandest stage for debaters worldwide, and a cradle for personal, regional, and even national growth and achievement, all in an action-packed week.
You're obviously talking about the NSDA tournament, known simply as the Nationals, right?
Exactly. It brings together over 6,000 students across 2,000 schools from countries all across the world to compete.
In fact, we've been there. Now allow us to share with you our once-in-a-lifetime experience and a journey we walked together. Hi, I'm Jessie Tsai.
And I'm Ethan Lowe. Through this video, you will know all the nits and grits, the nuts and bolts, and the ins and outs of our preparation, benefits, and more. For the NSDA tournament in 2023, the event that we majored in is called World Schools Debate. In this debate, debaters represent their district or their nation, and we represent Taiwan as Team Taiwan Red. This debate is a 3-on-3 debate, where there are 3 debaters on each side. And the topic for the debate, or the resolution, is called the motion. Now, there are 2 types of motions. The first is prepared motions, and the second is impromptu motions. Now, let's break down all of the 8 speeches in order. The first speech being the first prop speech. In this speech, you lay down your foundation for this debate, which are your 2 first arguments, also called your 2 substantive points. Each substantive point has layers of analysis, which are like warrants and impacts that help the audience know where you're coming from and what you want to argue. This also goes for the next speech, which is the first op speech. For the second prop and op speeches, what you do is you rebut against the arguments that were laid down by your opponent. You say what is wrong with them, and you provide examples and evidence to make these arguments weaker. And you can also fortify your own arguments that were rebutted by your opponent. In this speech, you also give your third substantive argument. So, as you can see, for the first 2 speeches, you can always give new evidence and new arguments. But that is not the case for the next 2 speeches, which are the third prop speech and the third op speech. For these speeches, you start to condense the round, and you start to identify the main points of clash, where the most arguments have been placed in, what is the most controversial issue on this motion. It is where you start to show why your side wins what and how big the impact is on each side. Now, one thing to note here is, after the third opposition speech comes the reply speeches. But instead of the prop going first, like the first 3 speeches, the op goes first. This means that the third opposition speech and the first opposition reply speech go back to back. This is also known as the op block. For reply speeches, what you do is you crystallize the round and show who has won. It's kind of like a final focus. A unique part of World Schools Debate is POIs, also known as points of information, where a member of the team opposing that of the current speaker gets to briefly interrupt them with a question or a statement, which a speaker then has to reply to in their speech. But notice that you can only ask POIs after the first minute that the speaker starts to begin their speech, and you cannot ask any POIs in the last minute of the speech. This is considered protected time. From the 1-minute mark to the 7-minute mark, you can ask as many POIs as you like, but you cannot ask in the first minute or the last minute. Although you can ask as many POIs as you like, it is up to the speaker who is giving the speech to see if they want to accept that many POIs. So you can wave down your opponents simply by a hand gesture or saying no thank you when deciding which POIs to take. And when you give POIs, these questions should always be strategic, because you not only want to interrupt your opponent, but you want to disrupt your opponent by asking questions or giving statements that conflict with their arguments. Moving on. How do you evaluate the round? Well, the judges have 3 criteria to place points on. First is content, and then strategy, and then style. So some important traits to have is being persuasive. You can even add a little humor inside, a little flair, because it's helped with your style points. You should also be strategic about which points of clash you should identify and what arguments you should tackle instead of just tackling all the arguments. Because in Worlds, you don't have to reply to each argument specifically. What you can do is strive to show why you win on the bigger picture. You should also try to be knowledgeable, because you can give examples on different issues around the world. For impromptu motions, that is not the case. You only have 1 hour before you debate to prepare, because you can only know the topic an hour before the round actually starts. In this hour, you cannot use the internet. You cannot use any digital devices. You cannot ask a coach or ask a teacher. All you have is your brains, an almanac, and a dictionary. So you should really rely on your knowledge that you have accumulated through this whole process to help you with these impromptu rounds. The prepared motions that we debated are whether the Olympics should have a permanent host city and if the AI is beneficial for the workforce or not. For the impromptu motions, we debated on should countries that are high polluters take in climate refugees, and also should energy sectors be nationalized, and should teams be leaders of social movements. So these are the rounds that we debated in. Now on to our results. In our 6 prelim rounds, we had 3 wins and 3 losses, and sadly, we did not advance.
The second event we compete is Extemporaneous debate. The format is easy. This is a one-on-one debate. Each side, you have 3 speeches, and each one is a 2-minute speech. This event we apply for is a supplemental event. And the procedure of the debate would be like, the resolution will release 30 minutes before the round starts. And within this 30 minutes of preparation, you can either prepare with your teammates or with your coaches. And you can use your internet and laptop to search for evidence and anything you want to write it down. Each round has 4 flights. Flight 1, 2, 3, 4. And a judge have to judge one round, same resolution for 4 times. And before round starts, they will send you an email that tells you which flights you are and which room you should be in, and also send you the resolution. And after the round, some judges would give you some comments, but most of them, they won't. In order to break in extemporaneous debate, you have to win 3 out of 4 rounds. But unfortunately, we only win 2 rounds.
My name is Ethan Lowe, and I am mainly the second speaker and sometimes the reply speaker for Team Taiwan Red. My contribution to our team includes writing our Olympic cases and also writing some third substantive arguments, as well as writing rebuttals to arguments that our opponents might make. Now, let me walk you through the preparation that I have to do as a second speaker. For rounds that are already released ahead of time, the prepared rounds, what I do is I have a lot of background research, as well as I have to communicate with our first speaker to see what arguments that we are laying down, and also in the process I can check what arguments that our opponents might make so I can have a better and easier time to analyze what rebuttals I should prepare for. For impromptu motions, it's even more complicated because you never know what topic you might get. These topics, they might be philosophical, so I had to spend a lot of time studying philosophy. They might be about economics, where you have to watch videos and also learn about more US-based financial aspects. These topics can also be about the world, so consuming news in the form of news articles or podcasts is very important for this. And since all you get is a dictionary and an almanac, you can never use the internet. And that means that this should all done beforehand. So the best thing to do is just cram in as much knowledge as possible. Another thing that greatly benefited me in practice was giving practice speeches and also PDs, or practice debates. For practice debates, you could go against your teammate, you could go against your coach. We also had practice debates with Taipei American School and also different various schools from the US. And in these debates, they simulate how a round actually goes down so that you can have actual battlefield experience. For practice speeches, you can do them by yourself. Pretend that you are in a round and just watch an online round and make yourself maybe the second speaker or the third speaker, depending on which speaker role you play. These rounds help a lot because you can keep redoing these speeches until they are perfect. And that is important because other than knowing what to say in a round, it's also important to get down the fundamentals, which are the fluency of your speech. As a second speaker, it's also important to discuss with your other teammates who are also second speakers because you need a lot of conflicting perspectives to be a better second speaker. Let me give an example of this. When we were talking about the Olympics topic, it was really hard to find reasons why a permanent host would be bad for sustainability or the environment. In this case, since you can't think of an argument yourself, you can always hop on a call with other second speakers and try to find solutions. This is why teammates are important, especially for Worlds. And since World Schools Debate is the one where you have the most teammates in, I strongly suggest that you can use this to your advantage.
Now move on to how I prepare for national debate. In the beginning of the training sections, the first thing I would start doing is skill set analysis. The first thing you have to do during this training section is to know what your strengths and your weaknesses. For example, start from listening. Knowing yourself, how much you can keep up with the speaker and your comprehension level, how much you can understand them. If you have hard time following their speed or you have hard time understand the content of the speech, you have to note that and then try to practice accordingly. And the second thing you have to analyze yourself is speaking, your fluency and your argument delivery. If you don't have many vocabularies in your brain or your grammar may have a lot of mistakes, you have to fix that accordingly and then trying to think about how you can practice and make your own training schedule. But everyone has different weaknesses and strengths, so you can just make your own schedule and prepare for it. But I would take myself as an example here. The 2 biggest issues I have is about knowledge and delivery. About knowledge, when I am practicing the impromptu motion, I constantly feel that I don't have enough knowledge for the resolution, or I don't have enough examples to present to the judges or audience. In this case, you can try to listen to a lot of podcasts. They could be educational, but the things I think you can start doing it very easily is about news reports. Listening to it is very easy to follow up and it's really useful. You can just grab on some new examples and current social issue and apply it in your speech, and then trying to make the relation between these examples and your own arguments and trying to convince or persuade your judge. And the second thing you can do is to read some books. The last round we had in World School Debate is the motion is, this House supports the nationalization of the resource sector. I think this topic is mostly break down into public good and private interest. You can read some books before 10. And the second thing I practice a lot is my delivery. What you can do, I think it's very easy to do and will also gain your knowledge and your listening skill, is to watch rounds. Tons of rounds on YouTube. When you're looking and watching all these rounds, you can learn from all the good debaters. You can either steal some good sentence from them and then apply in your own speech. Make these things yourself and then make your speech even better than before. And the second thing you can do, just see how others deliver their own arguments. The way they explain their arguments, the way they demonstrate and presented their cases. Learn from them. If you find out, oh, when I listen to them, it's easy for me to understand, then it would also be easy for judges to understand. And this is very important. The last thing, I think it's kind of irrelevant, but it's useful. It's about gaining some new ideas. When you're watching people competing, debating in different cells from you will learn from them, and somehow I think it will stimulate your brain to think about new things. For example, when I watch World School Debates rounds online on YouTube, I found out there are different styles of each debaters. You can find out some style that you like or you think is similar and learn from them. And the second thing I would do is to give out speeches. It's important because in debates, the whole thing to do is just to deliver a speech. But how exactly you can practice about it? Things I would do is I would pick up a random topic and give myself 30 minutes or any times you need to prep for a 2-minute speech. As you practice, you can make it more challenging. For example, you can do a 3-minute speech with 30 minutes prep or a 2-minute speech with 10 minutes prep. And remember to record yourself. You have to record yourself, one, because sometimes you will make some mistake that you don't even know. And the second thing, people tend to use filler words, but it's totally unuseful and you don't need them. So when you record yourself, you can replay it and you will know what things you have to improve and what you don't know that, oh, you make some mistakes. But the most important thing is when you replay it, you have to refine them on paper. And the last thing you do is to redo. Redo the speech until you think you perfect it. But obviously, nothing is perfect. I am the first speaker of our team, which means that all of the first speech is my job. I have to write everything. And it's important to build up your first speech. It's because you have to build up a solid base for your team to use. What a good first case should contain. The first thing, offense arguments. Very obvious, you have to make arguments in your first speech. But what is considered as a good offense argument? I think there are 3 points. First, it has to have strong impact. And second, with nice evidence and examples. Third, you can make extension. Why you have to have strong impact? Strong impact can have a good consistency of the debate. It doesn't necessarily have to be a very big impact where it will affect a lot of people. You just have to think about this impact, whether it will affect people, and whether you are able to explain that well. If you understand the impact, you know how exactly you want to explain and demonstrate to people, I think that would consider a strong impact that you can use. Or you can somehow forecast the future of this impact. I know it sounds a little bit ambiguous, but you just have to think about it, how your opponent will attack it, and how you will rebuild it, and see if this impact could still stand. If this impact still stands from the beginning to the end, then this impact, you should definitely master it and practice tons of things to practice about explaining it and then talking to people about how important your impact and your argument is. And the second thing is nice evidence and examples. This is obvious. With nice examples and nice evidence, it gives you the credibility of this argument. The whole debate is not about making tons of new arguments. It's about extend your arguments and make your speech stay consistent. But you just have to make sure that your arguments can't make all this extension, or you can either make connect one or your two arguments together, and then trying to extend this two into another whole new concept. And the second thing I would think of is the framework of the debate. The framework in world school debate is about how your world would look like. And the second thing is framework you can think about is an approach that helps judges to weigh. This is a special thing that I think especially happens in world. But the concept you can also apply it on PF, policy, or other debates event. Setting burdens is about lay down some qualification. This qualification is not a definition. The qualification is to lay down the things that you think your opponents have to prove in order to win, or the things you only have to prove. And the third thing, I think it's kind of easy to do, is to make your arguments easy for the judges to follow. And the last thing is preempt. This is important to do, but I think still worth spend time thinking about it. Preempt is pre-answer your argument, which means if you know that this argument will be attacked by your opponent, and what will their answer would be? What most likely would be their answer to this argument.
The first time that we actually got a taste of what it was to be like at a national tournament this big was when we went to the Phoenix Convention Center on Sunday. Now, this is where all the main events are being held and where registration occurred. My first thought stepping into it was, wow, I've never seen so many accomplished debaters in the same venue. There had to be thousands of people there, and it was astonishing to me because everyone was there for the same reason, which was speech and debate. There are two things that I specifically remember. The first is making new friends. So that was a day where you could meet more people there, and literally people would come up and say hello to you, and you could introduce yourself. Having benefited from being of Taiwan, which is a completely new country to a lot of people, they've never met someone from Taiwan, it was pretty cool sharing my own cultural background. Another thing was a lot of people were lining up at the NSDA stores to get their hands on Prickles, which is, well, as you can see here, this cute plushie that represented the 2023 Cactus Special, which is the NSDA held in Phoenix. Sadly, I did not get my hands on one. So after that, we left the convention center, and it was time for our last preparation before our actual debate tomorrow. For the preparation, we usually spend our time at the hotel where the Taipei American School teammates stayed, and the preparation there was vigorous training of refining our own cases, finalizing things, and also even practice rounds as well. And this all led up to Monday, which is when we started our World Schools Debate tournaments. Now, I debated in 3 rounds, and although I was nervous going into each one of them, the good thing is I won all 3 rounds I participated in. The first one being the AI opposition. We were opposition for the AI topic on whether it would be beneficial for AI to be increased in the workforce. I would say that the main reason that we won this round was because of how prepared we are. Because this is a prepared motion, you can have loads of time to prepare and collect evidence and do background research. This helped a lot because no matter what argument they threw at us, we could always retaliate, and we won the important arguments on job loss as well. The second round I debated in was the Olympics topic, and we were propositioned for having a permanent host city for the Olympic Games. Now, we went against Team Mexico Red, another international team, and it was a really fun experience. This is the round I had the most fun in because Team Mexico came in with a lot of style. They were very persuasive in how they delivered their speeches, but we ultimately won on strategy because I remember picking out a lot of logical flaws and issues on the pragmatic level with their counterplan for the motion, as well as giving a lot of empirical evidence and examples on why the plan that they proposed would not work. The third argument that I participated in was on big polluting countries should take in climate refugees. We were a side proposition for this debate. And being an island nation ourselves, Taiwan, right? We are surrounded by waters. So we could showcase how rising sea levels because of climate change could make ourselves into climate refugees. I also talked about other countries such as Tuvalu, which actively is inside a climate crisis right now and having their climate refugees being relocated in New Zealand. And all of these factors, the background research I've done and where I'm from, ultimately helped me to be persuasive about how big its impact is and win the round. Now let's talk about some stuff that we did between rounds. As our coach Lawrence told us, we should always take at least a 30-minute break in between rounds that has nothing to do with debate at all. So this includes chatting with friends, lying down under a tree, or just getting a snack, because you really need to let your mind and body rest from such a strenuous task that is as demanding as debate is. And between rounds, we also reflected on how we did on the last rounds. We also started to prepare for the next rounds if we could, if they were prepared motions. Or we also would talk with our coaches on what we should do if we meet a certain situation in a round that we have never experienced before. Because for a lot of us, this was our first time debating at nationals and World Schools Debate as well. Now, after all that was over, we had dinner. But sometimes in dinner, you couldn't even stuff down a single bite, but you had to, because you needed the energy for the next day and needed to keep pushing through. It's also very tiring and taxing on our body, like I just mentioned. So when we were back at the hotel, all we wanted to do was lay down, but there was still rounds tomorrow. So I still remember being up until 12, although you shouldn't, preparing for motions that you would debate in the upcoming rounds tomorrow.
Now let's talk about some of my reflection of the whole trip. I would divide it into 3 sections. First is during rounds, and then second, outside rounds. Third, watch rounds. The first one is during rounds. It's incredible. It's so different. The event is huge. You meet a lot of different opponents. All the rounds are so different compared that we have in Taiwan. The first thing I learned a lot is about teamwork. During rounds, teamwork is just so important. 2 things that I think I learned the most are communication and job distribution. I think Ethan had just talked about there are impromptu motions during World School Debate. Before the round starts, we have an hour to prepare for it. This is essential and this crucial time that we get together and talk about the speaker position and what we want to say. So in this time, communication is just very important here. You have to know and understand your teammate, what they want to say and what they think is important to say, but also present your own thoughts and talk about your own thoughts. It's a special thing that I think most happened in World School is teammates talk to each other with sticky notes. We write down our own thoughts and some new arguments or some rebuttals that you think of, just pass it to your teammates and they will use it if they think it's necessary or they think it's helpful. I think it's kind of a good way to communicate with your teammates because there is no prep time in World. So you don't have time to actually talk to them. So the thing is when they have to pay attention on 2 things. First, communicate with you and then listen to your opponent's cases. They don't have time, communicate with you. They definitely don't have time. So you just write it down and pass it to it. When they have time, they will read it, and if they need it, they will use it. So just use sticky notes. I think it's very useful. And then the second thing is job distribution. We know how to distribute all the work and all the speech. Who's going to write the introduction? Who's going to write some example? Who's going to write an argument? And if you lay down all this, teamwork will be easy and very helpful. And the second thing is about decision making. During rounds, you have to know what to say and what is just being attacked and defeated. You don't have to mention that again. To narrow down the debate, you have to know what's important, especially in your last speech. I am the first, because in world formats, there will be first or second speaker will be the reply speaker, and I am the first speaker and reply speaker. So every time when I given out my last speech, I would think about what's important, to mention it again, to remind judges to weigh your speech, to weigh the debate. What is important? Is our impact from the first argument stay? Should I mention that again and then tell judge why you have to vote on this? Thank you to all those who supported us along the way, especially my teammates.
Why, thank you. Hope you can see us again next year.
It'll be my turn to talk about the preparation of the whole trip and the role of the teacher here. Because this tournament is held in the US and the student needs more training in knowledge and language, the debate coach takes the full responsibility of debate training, and he also has to be the chaperone in the US. As for me, I'm responsible for communication with parents, foundation, school, and the education bureau. I also keep track of the budgets and help process all the administrative work before and after the trip. So to make this trip happen, we need to consider the budget, hotel booking, car rental, schedule, and administrative process. So for the budget part, before the trip, I estimated all the expenses and I helped to find the sponsors. And during the trip, then I track all the expenses and control the budget all the time. For the hotel reservation, that because we reserved the room from the NSDA website, so we save a lot of money in accommodation. And in our trip, that we have a few hours layover in San Francisco, so the coach helped us to arrange the trip there. And here are some important points that I want to remind you. First is to remember to check how much time you have. And the second one is remember to check the temperature. The third one is to plan the itinerary first and really have to be flexible because there is always something unexpected will happen and make sure you have enough time to take care of that. Okay, and so this table shows our travel plan. So as you can see, most of the time we were doing debate or I will be the judge, and for the final 2 days we will watch run in the convention center. So we did not have a lot of time to go sightseeing or go to the tourist attraction. So if next time you want to do that, make sure you have more days in the US. And for the administrative process, for the teacher and the students, it takes about 1 month to complete the whole application process. So make sure you process this beforehand. And that's all about my part. Thank you.